James from Staten Island. Hypothetically speaking, I would like to know how you would handle this situation. As you approach the Royal Rumble, it becomes evident that LA Knight's momentum has only continued to grow, and Cody Rhodes is not as popular as he was before in his feud with Brock Lesnar. You have both men in the Rumble, but it is made abundantly clear that the crowd is solely behind the self-proclaimed megastar. What do you do in that situation? Do you stubbornly dig into the plans that you have already, or do you adjust to who the crowd has connected with and who they have spent the majority of their money on and do something that matters with both men rather than just one of them? I feel like this is a fair question to ask because we have seen this happen before in 2014 and 2015. I don't think that just because WWE has plans that they should ignore the audience. How would you handle it? I do think that there are times, as we saw with LA Knight just recently, where sometimes you just have to give the people what they want. And you have to know how to read the audience, and you have to know how to react. And if that means changing on the fly sometimes, then you change on the fly. It is harder when you're going into WrestleMania because if you have a long-term booking plan that's been in play for a year or 9 months or 6 months, you're building to the Rumble, you're building to WrestleMania, and to just change on a dime is hard to do. I get that. What you're proposing here almost makes it sound like if you get to the Rumble and all of a sudden the crowd turns on Cody and is going nuts for LA Knight, do you make LA Knight win? No, you don't do that. Because they're going to know before they get to the Rumble. I don't even know where the Rumble is next year if they've made that announcement yet, but wherever the Rumble is, they're going to know long before they get to the Royal Rumble, at least a few months before they get to the Rumble, whether or not the fans are, Cody is starting to lose the fans, and if LA Knight is getting even more popular, or if he's getting less popular. It's not going to just hit them over the back of the head like a surprise when they get to the actual Rumble show. You get to the actual Rumble show, you're not calling it Audible and saying, okay, this story we've been telling for a year with Cody, everybody's cheering for LA Knight, and they happen to be booing Cody here in this city, so fuck it, we're going to have LA Knight win the Rumble. I'm not doing that. But if, let's say, you get to November, let's say you get to December, and it looks like Cody's popularity is starting to fade, and I don't think it will, because he's been able to sustain his popularity this far, even after the WrestleMania loss and everything else, he's still very popular. I don't see that changing in the next few months. But let's say he does start fading. And LA Knight is only getting stronger and the reactions are only getting louder, right? Let's just say. Then I would consider making a change from Cody against Roman Reigns to LA Knight against Roman Reigns. And I would want to have some kind of a backup plan for Cody. I don't want to just fuck Cody over by taking his story away from him and then having nothing for him to do. I would have to have something else planned for Cody without just pulling him from the main event of WrestleMania and having nothing for him to do. Because that's not fair to him. But yes, I do think with enough of a heads up, I would be willing to change plans. But it would have to be enough of a heads up. Like, I see what's coming. And I have time to plan accordingly. Because these things require a lot of advanced planning. The Daniel Bryan thing, you mentioned 2014 and 2015 as an example. And the Daniel Bryan thing goes back to the summer of 2013. When he won the championship at SummerSlam, immediately got fucked out of it, and they started the whole authority angle. It seemed pretty obvious from August that the direction should be Daniel Bryan beating the authority, and in the end, he stands tall at WrestleMania, he's the champion. He'll win the Royal Rumble, he'll go to WrestleMania, because the authority is going to throw every obstacle in his path to where the only way he could possibly get a title match is to win the Royal Rumble, right? It just seems so obvious. And then we come to find out that that was never the plan. That he was going to be 6th from the top. He said so in his own book. Him and Sheamus in a random match at WrestleMania. Now, thankfully, common sense prevailed, and he got lucky with CM Punk walking out. Had CM Punk not walked out, I don't think that happens. So there was a little bit of luck involved there, too. But in the end, they did the right thing. But it is inconceivable to me that they didn't see what the rest of us saw by the end of the summer, early fall, as far as what that WrestleMania story should have been. The LA Knight thing, he's doing really well right now. He's really over. I don't think he's going to be winning any world titles at WrestleMania next year, but there's a long way to go between now and Philadelphia in April. They could be very well end up in a situation like that where they decide, hey, we may have to make a judgment call here. Cody can finish his story some other time, right? Because we all know Cody's going to be the world champion one day. Whether it's next year, the year after, it's going to happen. But I think it just comes down to timing. If you're telling me we get to the Rumble and, oh my God, listen to the crowd, I'm not calling an audible and blowing up my plans because fucking Orlando or fucking Dallas or Chicago or Seattle or whatever city they happen to be in that night decided, you know what, we're going to rebel against Cody and we're going to cheer for the other guy. So let me push the detonation button here, and everything we've been planning for our 40th WrestleMania is going to be flushed down the tubes because of one reaction. They're going to know, though, far enough in advance, and then they can make a judgment call. So I'm flexible. I would be willing to change plans, but not the day of. I just think that would be stupid. Eli from Brooklyn, New York. You mentioned the other night that it was the anniversary of Chris Jericho's WWE debut, which brings me to my question. Who do you think has had the best debut in WWE between Chris Jericho and AJ Styles? I feel it's AJ because in his debut, he was challenging for the WWE Championship. He was, you got to put a little asterisk next to that, though. Him and 28 other people. I guess 29 if you want to count Roman, who was the champion. So, yeah, it sounds impressive, but realistically, it's, come on. I still go for Jericho, though. Jericho is one of the top 2 all-time debuts. I have that at number 2. As far as on the list of best WWE debuts, for me, it's Kane number 1, Jericho number 2. But it's close. Look, AJ didn't win the Rumble, but it was a hell of a debut. And I'm happy to say that I was one of the people cheering for him when the word phenomenal appeared on the screen. I was in the building in Orlando that night, and the people... I know AJ has said he wasn't sure if people would know who he was. And I can tell you from being there, plenty of people knew exactly who he was. Especially being in Orlando, all the years he spent working in TNA, of course people were going to know who he was. So it was a great moment. Unfortunately, it would have been a lot nicer if the camera had shown it on TV. Thanks, Kevin Dunn. Carlito in Gaithersburg, Maryland. Based on their age, their time in the business, their comparable career trajectories, and having somehow survived this long even after questionable manager gimmicks, is it plausible to say that LA Knight is this generation's Diamond Dallas Page? There are similarities in both men getting naturally over with the audience at a later age than most. I would throw Batista in there as another example of someone getting over and becoming a star later than most people. The biggest difference, though, is that DDP did not wrestle his first match until he was 35 years old. Which is pretty mind-blowing when you think of the success he went on to have. It was really him and Goldberg during that whole Monday Night War period in WCW who were the 2 big kind of original names that came out of WCW. Sting was already a star by that point for many years. I guess maybe you could throw Scott Steiner in there as well, but I always think of Goldberg and DDP were the 2 biggest, and they were the 2 biggest homegrown WCW names during that whole Monday Night War period. And Page didn't wrestle his first match until he was 35. He was managing and doing other stuff. But yeah, I think it was 1991. He was 35 years old. It's pretty late in the game to be having your first match. LA Knight wrestled his first match when he was 21. So that's the biggest difference there. He spent a lot more time floundering or just wrestling somewhere else before he finally caught his big break. He started young. DDP did not. But, he just didn't fully break through until he turned 40. And hopefully this push that he's in the middle of right now can be sustained. Jamie from Waterloo, Ontario. When Sting first debuted his Crow gimmick, he seemed to be paired with Randy Savage after a segment between the two. Then Savage randomly ended up in the NWO. Was this idea of Savage and Sting together just scrapped, or did I miss something? It felt that way. Sting and Savage coming out as vigilantes was not to be confused with the vigilante Sting. But coming out as vigilantes, they were getting a good response. He and Sting were basically treated as free agents on TV. Savage was gone legitimately for a few months because he hadn't reached a new contract with WCW. So I think he had a Halloween Havoc match with Hogan, and he went away for a few months, and then I guess it was January when he reappeared. And so they called him a quote-unquote free agent. And I think that's when they also did the segment where Savage hijacked an episode of Nitro. And he and Sting started showing up together. But then a few weeks later, he joined the NWO. And I think Eric Bischoff may have given some sort of ultimatum on TV that he had to join, or, he can't be fired, I guess, because he was a free agent. But he wouldn't get a contract with WCW or something. And so it was something to that effect. So he ended up joining the NWO. Was it silly after all that he had been through with Hogan and what the NWO did to him and beating him up and spray painting his bald spot and everything? Yes, of course, it was silly for him to just turn around and join. But you could also say that there were a lot of guys who got beaten up by the NWO who ended up turning around and joining, right? Big Show was another one. Scott Steiner was one. You could look at it and go, if you can't beat him, join him. Maybe they just got tired of being beaten up every week, and so they decided, the path of least resistance, I'm just going to join up with them. Because almost everybody ended up joining the NWO at some point, whether it was the black and white, the red and black Wolfpack. Almost everybody ended up joining. I think Sting worked better as a lone wolf anyway, so I didn't have an issue with them keeping Sting solo like that. I think it worked better for the angle with Hogan. And DDP, he got the biggest break of his career working against Savage that year. So it all worked out.